There is a door on the third floor of the east wing that I had guarded for 2 years without once seeing it opened, and I had come to think of it the way a man thinks of a grave he tends, something you keep, not something you use. It was a tall door of dark oak with a brass handle worn pale at the grip, though no hand had turned that handle in all the time I stood before it. Behind it lay the private dressing room of the late Queen Isolde, dead these 3 years, and the standing order that kept it shut had a name on it that no one in the house of Harrogate crossed lightly. That name was Crown Prince Rowan. The order was 6 words long. I had them by heart the way I had my own name, and on the gray morning I am going to tell you about, I said them aloud to a woman who wore a crown and was not used to being told no. My name is Corwin Hale. I served 11 years in the ceremonial guard of Eldermore before that morning, and I have served years since. But if a man asks me which single hour of all of them I would stand behind again without changing a breath of it, it is that one, the hour the Queen Consort Morwenna came up the east stair with her chin high and her retinue behind her, and tried to walk through a door I was sworn to keep. I am not a man who talks much. The uniform does not encourage it, and neither does my nature. But this is a thing that ought to be told properly, because so much of what was said about it afterward was wrong, and because the truth of it does honor to a boy who was not there to defend himself. The Crown Prince, who gave the order out of a grief so private that he could not say why, and trusted men like me to hold it without asking. Let me set the door in your mind first, for the door is half the story. The east wing of the royal residence is the old part, the part the tourists never see, where the corridors are narrow, and the light comes in slantwise through tall leaded windows and lands in long bars on a carpet that has held the tread of 6 generations. The dressing room sits at the far end, past the Queen's former sitting room, which was emptied and given over to storage after her death, and past a linen closet, and past a servant's stair that is no longer used. It is the last door in a dead-end passage. There is nothing beyond it. A man posted there stands with his back to a wall of shelves, and his face to a corridor down which no one comes without a reason. And so for 2 years I had learned every reason a person might have, and had turned nearly all of them away. The order read, "This room stays closed, no exceptions." It was written in the Crown Prince's own hand on a card that the master of the household kept in a drawer, and a copy was pinned inside the guardroom where every man who took the east wing detail could read it before he climbed the stair. No exceptions. 2 words that most orders soften with a clause. No exceptions except for the king, except for cleaning, except on the anniversary, except for the prince himself. This one had no except. When I first took the post, I asked the sergeant what a man was to do if the king himself came up and put his hand to the handle. The sergeant, a hard old soldier named Byrne who had guarded 3 monarchs, looked at me a long moment and said, "The king will not come. He gave his son the room to keep, and the king keeps his word to his son. But if he does come, you say the order, and you let the king be the one to break it if he chooses. You do not open it for him. You do not open it for anyone. You hold the door, and you make them be the one who crosses the prince, not you." I have thought about that answer more times than I can count. It is the whole of a guardsman's craft in 4 sentences. Now the morning. It began ordinary, which is how the mornings that matter always begin. I had come on at 6, relieved young Aldous who had the night, and taken up my place at the end of the passage with the gray light climbing the windows and the residents waking around me, the far-off clatter of the kitchens, a floor polisher humming 2 corridors over, the ordinary noise of a great house doing its small work. I stood as I always stood. There is a way to stand that costs nothing for the first hour and everything by the 4th, and I had long since made the trade with my own body. Feet set, spine straight, rifle at the shoulder, though up there in the dead-end passage no one but the dust would ever see it. Eyes forward on the middle distance, seeing everything and looking at nothing. A guardsman learns to be furniture. The trick, the real trick that takes years, is to be furniture that is also entirely awake. I heard them before I saw them. You always do. A great house carries sound the way water carries it, and the east stair below has a particular ring to it when more than one person climbs it together. A doubled, hurried tread, and under it the softer sounds that tell you who is coming, the particular click of a certain kind of heel, the rustle of a certain weight of cloth. I knew before the first head cleared the top step that it was the Queen Consort, and I knew that she had brought people with her, and a guardsman's stomach tightens at that, because a person who comes to a locked door with witnesses has already decided how the scene is meant to end. They have written it. They have cast it. They only need the door to play its part. She came up the last of the stairs and into the passage, and the gray light caught her all at once. Queen Consort Morwenna, the king's second wife, married to Alaric 11 years, mother to a grown son and a grown daughter of her own and stepmother in name, to the crown prince who had given the order I stood to keep. She was a handsome woman and knew it, and carried herself with the particular certainty of a person who has spent a decade learning that rooms rearrange themselves around her. That morning she wore dove gray and a short strand of pearls, and upon her head, up there, in a private corridor at 9:30 in the morning, where no one was meant to see her, a thin coronet of white gold. I noticed the coronet and I understood it. She had dressed for a scene. A woman does not put a crown on to fetch something from a cupboard. She puts it on to be obeyed. Behind her came three. Her lady-in-waiting, a nervous, elegant woman named Lady Verena, who was in fact her own daughter, though at that hour I did not think of the family map, only of the fact that there were 4 bodies in my passage where there should have been none. A footman in the household livery carrying nothing, which I marked, because a footman who carries nothing is a footman brought along to carry something out. And her steward, a smooth gray man called Pell, who managed the Queen Consort's private affairs, and whose face I had learned to distrust the way you learn to distrust a smell of gas. Nothing you can point to, only a wrongness the animal part of you insists on. They came down the passage toward me, and I did not move. I want you to understand that the not moving is not a pose. It is the first line of the whole defense. A guardsman who shifts his weight, who glances, who lets his face do the small polite things a face wants to do, has already conceded that the person approaching has standing to make him react. The stillness says, before a word is spoken, you have not yet given me a reason. It is a courtesy, and it is a wall, both at once, and the people who hate it most are precisely the ones who most need to be walled. Morwenna stopped a pace from me, which was a pace closer than manners allowed, and looked up at my face. I am a tall man, and the bearskin makes a tall man a tower, with an expression she had clearly decided on in advance. Warm, regretful. The expression of a person about to ask you to do a small kind thing that any decent man would do without thinking. It is a far more dangerous expression than anger. Anger you can simply outlast. Warmth asks you to betray yourself and feel good about it. "Guardsman," she said. Her voice was low and pleasant and pitched just loud enough that the 3 behind her would hear every word. "I'm sure you know who I am." I said nothing, which is the correct answer to a question that is not a question. "I've come up to the late Queen's dressing room," she went on, tilting her head toward the door at my back as though it were a small matter, a nothing. "There are 1 or 2 things of hers the family would like to see properly looked after. It's been 3 years. It isn't right, is it, to leave her things shut up in the dark? She'd have hated that Isolde was never one for shut doors." She smiled, and it was a good smile, practiced and soft. "So, if you'd be so kind, step aside and let us in." There it was, not a request, though it wore a request's clothes. An instruction dressed as a kindness, delivered before witnesses so that the refusing of it would look like cruelty and the granting of it would look like grace. She had done this before to other doors, to other men, and it had worked, because most men will trade a rule they only half understand for the approval of a queen standing a pace away and smiling. She was counting on that. She had built the whole morning on it. I looked at a point on the far wall, and I said the 6 words. "This room stays closed, no exceptions." I did not raise my voice. There is no need. In a narrow stone passage, a level voice carries perfectly well, and a level voice is harder to argue with than a loud one, because a loud one can be met with a louder, but a level one just sits there, immovable, like the door itself. The words came out flat and even and final, and I watched them land on her, and I watched the warm expression hold for 1 second too, while she decided whether she had heard me correctly. "I beg your pardon," she said, and the warmth was still there but thinner now, stretched over something else. "The room stays closed, ma'am," I said. "By standing order I can't step aside." For a moment nobody moved. The floor polisher hummed on, 2 corridors away, in another world. Lady Verana's eyes went from her mother to me and back. Pell, the steward, had gone very still in the way that watchful men go still. I saw him filing it, storing the moment, and I understood that whatever happened here would be reported and shaped and used, and that I had better be a man who could bear having his exact words repeated in front of the king. That thought did not frighten me. It steadied me. A man who has decided he can bear the truth of what he is doing has nothing left to be afraid of. Morwenna's smile changed. It did not vanish, she was far too skilled for that, but it acquired an edge, a fine bright edge like the edge of a good knife, and she let a small laugh out through it, a laugh meant to make me feel foolish. "A standing order," she repeated. "Whose standing order, guardsman? Do you imagine there is an order in this house that stands above the Queen? I am telling you to open the door. That is the order. Now." And this was the hinge of it, the first hinge, the one everything else swung from, because she was right about one thing and wrong about the thing that mattered. She was the Queen Consort. In the ordinary run of the house her word carried enormous weight. A footman jumps, a maid curtsies, a junior clerk finds whatever she asks to be found. But a standing order in the hand of the Crown Prince, entered in the household book, is not an ordinary instruction to be overridden by whoever outranks the last person to speak. It is a fixed thing. It stands until the man who said it takes it down, or until the king himself overrides it in the open, on the record, owning the choice. It does not bend to a coronet worn in a corridor at 9:30. And the whole craft of my post, the thing old Byrne had pressed into me, was to make her be the one to cross that line, not to argue her out of it, not to reason with her, but simply to stand so squarely on the order that she would have to knock me down or fetch a higher authority, and either way it would be her doing in the light, and not mine in the shadow. "The order is the Crown Prince's, ma'am," I said. "It's entered in the household book and posted in the guardroom. I hold it until His Highness lifts it, or until the king lifts it before witnesses. I can't lift it myself, and I can't stand aside while it stands. That's the whole of it. I'm sorry." I was not sorry exactly, but it is a word that a guardsman may spend without lying, because there is a real sorrow in it, the sorrow of a man who must disappoint a person to his face and cannot explain to her, in the moment, that he is protecting her as much as anyone from a mistake she is about to make in front of witnesses who will remember. I was sorry for the scene she had built, and was now going to have to either abandon or burn down. I was not sorry for the door. The door I would keep if she brought the whole court up that stair. "The Crown Prince," she said, and there was a note in the 2 words that I marked and did not yet understand, a note of something older than annoyance, a grievance with a history to it. "The Crown Prince is a grieving boy who has been allowed to lock a room in his father's house and turn it into a shrine, and no one in this family has had the spine to tell him it has gone on long enough. 3 years, guardsman. 3 years, one room shut, one door guarded day and night by great strong men doing nothing. Do you know what that costs? Do you know how it looks? It is not healthy. It is not seemly. It is a wound the boy keeps open because we all keep letting him." She stepped closer still and dropped her voice and turned the warmth back on like a lamp, aiming it at me alone now. "I am not his enemy. I am trying to help him. He cannot say goodbye while the room sits there pretending she might walk back into it. Sometimes the kindest thing is to open the shut door and let the light in. You're a sensible man. You can see that. Help me help him. I will tell you plainly, it was well done. It was very well done. If I had been a younger man or a man who did not know what I knew, it might have moved me, because there was a shape of truth in it. 3 years is a long time to keep a room. Grief that will not close its own doors is a real trouble, and I had seen it hollow out better men than the crown prince. And she had found the one lever that works on a guardsman, not fear, not flattery, but the appeal to his decency, the suggestion that the rule he holds is itself the cruelty, and that stepping aside would be the kind and human thing. That is the trap laid for men like me, and she had baited it beautifully. But I knew two things she did not know I knew. The first was small. It was the footman who carried nothing, and the empty satchel Pell held under his arm, and the fact that a woman who has come to check that a dead queen's things are properly looked after does not need a footman, a steward, an empty bag, and a coronet. You go to tend a memory with your own 2 hands and a soft voice. You go to remove something with a bag and a witness, and a reason prepared in advance. I did not know yet what she meant to take, but I knew, standing there, that taking was the verb, whatever the sentence around it. The second thing was larger, and it was the thing I could never have explained to her, and it is the heart of why I did what I did. I knew why the crown prince had sealed the room, not the official reason, the grief that everyone assumed and that Morwenna was so cleverly leaning on. The other reason, the one he had told exactly 2 people in the world, and I, by an accident of duty, was the second of them. I need to go back a little to tell you that, and then I will bring you straight back to the passage and the 4 of them and the door, because the thing was not over, it had barely begun. The crown prince Rowan was 19 when his mother died, and 22 on the morning I am describing. I had not known him as a boy. I came to the East Wing detail after the Queen was already 3 months gone, when the shock had hardened into the long gray business of surviving it. But a guardsman on a private post sees a great deal, precisely because he is treated as furniture, and I had watched the prince 100 times without his knowing I was watching, and I had formed a picture of him that I trusted more than the one the court passed around. The court's picture was the one Morwenna had just painted for me, a grieving boy, sensitive to the point of weakness, who had turned a room into a shrine and could not let go. It was a convenient picture. It made him small. It made his order the whim of a wounded child rather than the decision of the man he was becoming, and a whim can be indulged and then quietly overruled once the child is looking the other way. I understood, standing in that passage, that the whole of Morwenna's play depended on that picture being true, and that she believed it was true, and that this was the largest of her several mistakes. Because the prince did not seal that room out of the softness of grief, he sealed it out of the hardness of it. There is a difference, and it is everything. I will tell you how I learned it. It was in my first winter on the detail, deep in a night in the small hours, the kind of dead hour when a great house feels like the inside of a stopped clock. I was on the night watch. We alternated days and nights, and I was 2 hours from being relieved when I heard a single tread coming up the east stair. One person unhurried. I straightened and I waited, and the crown prince came up out of the dark of the stairwell into the low light of the passage, alone in a plain dark coat, with no attendant and no announcement, the way he sometimes came in the deep of the night when he thought the house was asleep and only the guard would see. He had a key in his hand. He was the one person in the world for whom the order made an exception, because the order was his, and a man may go into his own kept room. He stopped when he saw me, as though he had forgotten a man would be there, and then he nodded a real nod, not the automatic one the great give the small, and he said, "Hail, isn't it?" I said it was. He stood a moment with the key in his hand and did not use it, and then, because it was 3 in the morning and the dark makes confessors of us all, or because he had carried the thing alone as long as he could and I happened to be the man in front of him, he told me a piece of the truth. Not to unburden himself, I think, to arm me. Because he must have known, even then, that the day would come when someone would try what Morwenna tried, and the man at the door would need to understand what he was holding, Or he might be talked out of it by exactly the kind of warm and reasonable argument she had just made. "They think I keep it because I can't bear to change it," he said. He was not looking at me, he was looking at the door. "Let them think that, it's cleaner." A pause. "My mother left things in that room, not the dresses, not the trinkets everyone imagines. She left things she did not want certain people to have, and she told me where, and she told me to keep them safe until the time was right. And then she died before the time was right, and now the keeping of them is on me." He turned the key over in his fingers. "There are people in this house, Hale, who would give a great deal to get into that room for one quiet hour with no one watching. Not to grieve, to search. And when they find they cannot search it openly, they will try to search it by a story that it's morbid, that it's unhealthy, that a kind man would open it. Don't believe the story. The story is the crowbar. If anyone ever comes to that door with a good reason and a soft voice and a bag, you hold it. You hold it if they take the coat off your back. The order doesn't need a reason. That's the point of an order. Can you carry that?" I said I could carry it. "Good man," he said, and he did not go in after all. He put the key back in his pocket, and he stood a while longer looking at the door as a man looks at a thing that costs him something to keep, and then he went back down the stair into the dark, and I stood the rest of my watch with the whole weight of the house's secret suddenly resting on my 2 feet, and I found, somewhat to my own surprise, that I could carry it. A man can carry a great deal when he knows exactly what it is and exactly why. So that was the second thing I knew that Morwenna did not know I knew, that her kindest thing is to open the shut door, was not a fresh insight born of concern, but the precise crowbar the prince had warned me of, 3 winters back in the small hours, with a key he did not use in his hand. She had come to search a dead woman's room for something a dead woman had hidden from her, and she had wrapped the search in the softest story she could find, and she had brought a bag to carry it out in, and she had put a crown on to make the man at the door forget that a crown worn in a corridor is only cloth and gold. And the man at the door had been armed, 3 years since, against exactly this hour. Now let me bring you back up the east stair to where I left you. The 4 of them in the gray light, the coronet, the empty satchel, and the Queen Consort a pace from my face, waiting for the sensible man to see reason. "You've gone very quiet, guardsman," she said, and the softness had thinned almost entirely away now, the lamp of her warmth guttering as she felt it fail to catch. "I've explained myself. I've been more than patient. I've stood in a corridor and reasoned with a doorkeeper as though he were a person whose reasons mattered, which, believe me, is not a thing I make a habit of. Now step aside. I won't ask a 4th time." "You won't need to ask a 4th time, ma'am," I said, "because the answer will be the answer I've already given, however many times it's asked. The room stays closed. It's not mine to open. If your majesty believes the order is wrong, the way to change it is to take the matter to the crown prince or to the king and have the order lifted openly. Then any guard on this post will step aside gladly, but not on a word in a corridor. Not from anyone. That's not stubbornness, ma'am. That's the whole reason the order can be trusted at all, because it doesn't move for whoever happens to be standing closest to it." I have replayed that little speech many times, wondering if I said too much. A guardsman is safest when he says least, but I judged in the moment that she had committed too far to be turned by silence. That silence would only make her escalate, and that giving her the clean, correct road out of the scene, take it to the prince, take it to the king, was a mercy she might yet be wise enough to take. Morwenna, I saw, wanted her to take it. The young woman had drifted half a step back down the passage, her hands twisting the strap of her small bag, her face saying plainly that she wished herself anywhere else. She, at least, had understood that this was going badly and could only go worse. But Morwenna did not take the road. Women like Morwenna cannot take the road, because to a person whose whole authority rests on never being refused, a single refusal is not a setback but an existential threat, a crack in the one thing holding the house of their power up, and it must be closed at once, by force if warmth won't do it, before anyone else sees the crack and thinks the thought that a crack invites. so she reached past me for the handle. It was not a lunge. She was too composed for that even then. It was a smooth, entitled gesture, a woman reaching for a thing she had decided was hers, sliding her hand along beside me toward the pale brass knob, expecting the man in her way to melt back the half-step that good manners and long habit would surely make him take. That is the thing she had staked everything on, from the bag to the coronet to the witnesses, the reflex of a subordinate body to yield to a superior one. She had never in her life reached for a thing, and had a servant stay solid in the space she meant to move into. I stayed solid. I did not strike her hand away. You never touch a royal person, and a guardsman who lays a hand on the Queen Consort has handed his enemies the whole war on a plate, whatever the provocation. I did something both simpler and harder. I moved my own body a few inches, a small controlled shift of weight, so that my shoulder and the flat of my back and the length of the rifle came between her reaching hand and the handle, and I filled the space she was reaching into with the one thing she could not push through and could not touch, a guardsman standing his post. Her fingers met the dark wool of my sleeve and the cold line of the rifle instead of the brass, and she drew back as if she had touched a stove, not from pain, but from the shock of the world failing to rearrange itself for her. "How dare you?" she said, and now the mask was gone entirely, and the voice that came out was the true one, cold and flat and furious, the voice under all the warm ones. "You put yourself between me and that door. You put your body in my way. Do you understand what you've done? Do you have the faintest idea?" "I'm holding my post, ma'am," I said, level, always level. "I haven't touched you and I won't, but I won't be moved off this door either. Not by a hand and not by an order that isn't the prince's or the king's." Behind her, Pell the steward stirred, and for the first time he spoke in a voice as smooth and gray as the rest of him. "Your Majesty," he murmured, "shall I send down for the captain of the guard? A man refusing a direct instruction from the Queen Consort, that is a matter for his own superiors. Let them order him aside. He can hardly refuse his own captain." He said it to her, but he watched me while he said it, gauging whether the threat landed. It was a shrewd move, and I will give him that. If the captain came up and ordered me to open the door, I would be caught between two authorities, and a guardsman caught between two authorities is a guardsman about to lose whichever one he disobeys. Except that I would not be caught, and I knew it, though Pell did not, and this was the moment I began, very slightly, very privately, to enjoy myself, in the grim way a man enjoys a fight he has already understood the shape of before the other side has. Because the captain of the guard, if he came, would find himself standing where I stood, facing the same order in the same book in the same hand of the same crown prince, and the captain would say the same 6 words I had said, and there would then be 2 of us on the door instead of 1. Pell was threatening to summon reinforcements to my side. He did not know it, but that is what he was doing. "Send for him," I said before Morwenna could answer, and I saw the flicker of surprise cross Pell's gray face. The doorkeeper was not supposed to welcome the summoning of the man who could overrule him. "Send for the captain, and for the master of the household while you're at it, ma'am, who keeps the order card in his own drawer. Send for anyone you like. Every man who reads that order will tell you what I've told you. That's not a threat, ma'am. It's the opposite. It's the surest way to settle this without another word between us. Bring the people whose job it is to know, and let them say it. I'll stand aside for their ruling as readily as I'd stand aside for the prince's. But I think you know what their ruling will be. I think that's why you came up the back stair at 9:30 with a small party, and not through the front of the house at noon. That last was a hook, and I threw it deliberately, and I watched it catch. It was the first thing I had said that was not merely a refusal but an accusation, and it changed the temperature of the passage all at once, because it named the thing she had been at pains to hide from her own witnesses, that this was not the open, righteous errand of a concerned family member setting a morbid matter right, but a quiet, out-of-the-way bag and footman operation timed for an hour when the house was busy elsewhere. I had told her, in front of Verena and Pell and the empty-handed footman, that I could see the shape of what she was doing, and a person doing a quiet thing cannot bear to hear it named quietly by a servant in front of witnesses, because the naming is the crack, and the crack is the end. Her face did a thing then that I had never seen it do and would not see it do again. It lost its arrangement entirely, for perhaps a second and a half, and underneath the composed and handsome surface I saw the real animal of it, cornered and calculating and, yes, afraid. Not afraid of me. Afraid of the sentence I had spoken traveling down the stair and out into the house and up to the king. She recovered fast. She was always going to recover fast. But I had seen it, and she knew I had seen it, and something between us was decided in that second and a half, though the scene had a long way yet to run. "You insolent, jumped-up doorman," she said, very quietly now, so quietly that I think Verena, 3 steps back, did not catch all of it. "You will regret every word of this. I will have your post. I will have your name struck off the roll and your record marked so that you will not guard a coal cellar in this kingdom when I am done. A man of your rank does not accuse a queen. A man of your rank does not stand between a queen and a door and speak to her of back stairs and the hour of the day. Do you imagine anyone will take your word over mine? You are furniture, guardsman. You are a coat on a stand. When this is told, it will be told by me, and in my telling you will be a violent, unstable man who laid hands on the Queen Consort and had to be removed, and there will be 4 of us to say so and only you to say otherwise, and you will be gone by nightfall." Now that was the real threat, the one under all the others, and it was a good one, and I felt the weight of it settle on me true and cold, because she was right that it would be 4 voices against 1. She was right that a guardsman's word is a small thing set against a queen's. She was right that a well-told lie that I had touched her, shoved her, frightened her could end me, and that the very stillness and correctness I had held to would be recast as menace by a skilled enough tongue. I had no illusions. I stood there in the gray light knowing that I might well be, as she said, gone by nightfall. My 11 years struck off on the strength of 4 practiced liars, and 1 telephone call to a king who could not be everywhere. And I found this is the thing I most want to set down, because it is the thing a man does not know about himself until the hour comes to test it. I found that it did not change my footing by a hair's breadth. Not because I am brave. I am not especially brave. But because I had already, 3 winters before, in the small hours, told a grieving prince that I could carry the thing, and I had meant it, and a man who has given his word in the dark to a boy who trusted him does not take it back in the daylight because a woman with a crown threatens his pension. The threat was real. The door was more real. That was the whole of my arithmetic, and it came out clean. "You may have my post, ma'am," I said. "That's within your power or near enough, and I won't pretend it isn't. If it costs me the post to keep this door until the prince or the king says otherwise, then it costs me the post, and I'll go quiet and I'll go clean, and I'll not have laid a finger on you nor raised my voice, and whatever's said of me after, that much will be true and I'll know it. But I'll tell you what's not within your power, ma'am. Not the whole of the household nor the crown on your head can do it. You cannot make me open this door for you. That one thing is not for sale and not for threats. So send for the captain, or take it to the king, or turn around and go back down the stair. Those are the roads. But the door stays closed while I stand here, and I'm not going to be the one who steps away from it." There was a silence then, a real one, the floor polisher having finally fallen quiet 2 corridors off. And into that silence came a sound none of us had expected, a sound from the far end of the passage, from the top of the east stair, of a single new tread coming up. Unhurried. Even. The tread of someone who had heard raised voices in a part of the house where voices were never raised, and had come to see. We all turned. And I will tell you who it was, but first you should know what it did to the arithmetic of the passage, because it changed everything, and not in the direction any of us had reckoned on. It was Princess Adela, the king's sister, older than Alaric by 2 years, senior by temperament to every soul in the house including the king, A woman who had spent 60 years in and around the crown and had long since worn away every ounce of patience for nonsense, of which she had seen, in 6 decades, a very great deal. She came up the last of the stairs in a plain tweed and stout shoes, having been, as I learned later, walking the dogs on the terrace below when the sound of an argument came down through an open window, and she had handed the leads to a startled footman and climbed the east stair herself to find out who was shouting in her late sister-in-law's corridor. She was not a woman who sent someone to find out. She found out. She took in the scene at a glance, and I watched her take it in, and I saw the exact order in which she read it, because her face read it aloud whether she meant it to or not. First the coronet on Morwenna's head, in a corridor at 9:30, and one gray eyebrow rose a precise quarter-inch, which on Princess Adela was the equivalent of another person shouting the roof down. Then the footman who carried nothing and Pell with his satchel, and Verena hanging back white-faced by the linen closet. Then the door behind me, which she plainly knew, and knew was meant to be shut. And then me, standing square across it with my rifle at my shoulder and my face doing nothing. A guardsman planted between the Queen Consort of the realm and a door she wanted opened. "Well," said Princess Adela into the silence, in a dry, clear voice that carried the length of the passage without seeming to be raised at all, "this is a merry little morning, Morwenna. Why are you wearing a crown to visit a dressing-room?" I have never, before or since, heard a question do so much work with so few words. It went straight past every layer of the scene, past the argument, past the threat, past the door, and landed on the single detail that gave the whole thing away. The coronet, the tell, the costume of a woman who had dressed to be obeyed. Adela had seen in 3 seconds what it had taken me a quarter of an hour of standing to be sure of, and she had said it plainly, in front of the same witnesses, and there was nowhere for it to go. "Adela," said Morwenna, and I heard the effort it cost her to put the warmth back on for a woman she could not threaten and could not charm and could not outrank. "How lovely. I didn't expect I've come up on a small family matter, Isolde's things. It's been 3 years and I felt it was time someone saw them properly cared for. This guardsman, I'm afraid, has been—" She gathered herself and reached for the story, the one she'd told me, the crowbar, "has been quite impossible, rude, obstructive. He refuses to let the family into a family room, and when I remonstrated with him he became—" A delicate pause, laying the paving stones toward the lie she had promised me, "he became aggressive. I was about to send for the captain. I said nothing. It was not my place to defend myself to a princess. It was my place to hold the door and let the truth stand or fall on its own legs. But I confess my heart was going hard under the wool, because here it came, the 4 against 1, the recasting of me as the violent, unstable man, and it was beginning already, being tried out first on Adela to see if it would hold. Adela looked at me. It was a long look, a 60 years of reading men look, and I stood under it and let her read whatever she found. Then she looked back at Morwenna. "Aggressive," Adela repeated, in a tone that turned the word over and found it wanting. "That man is standing exactly as still as a man can stand. If that is aggression, Morwenna, then a lamppost is a brawler." She stepped further into the passage, closer to me, and turned so that she could speak to me directly, and her voice changed, not softer. Adela was never soft but level and serious, one professional addressing another. "Guardsman, tell me the order on this door, in its own words, not what she says of it, the order." "This room stays closed, ma'am," I said. "No exceptions. It's the Crown Prince's standing order, entered in the household book and posted in the guardroom. I hold it until His Highness lifts it, or until the King lifts it before witnesses. Her Majesty asked me to stand aside and let her party into the room, and I told her I couldn't, and I offered her the way to have it settled properly. The captain, the master of the household, the prince, the king. That's the whole of what's passed, ma'am. I've not touched Her Majesty, and I've not raised my voice." "No," said Adela. "I don't imagine you have. She held my eye a moment longer, and something passed in it, not warmth exactly, but a kind of recognition, the acknowledgement of one person who keeps their word to another who is trying to. Then she turned back to the Queen Consort, and the temperature of the passage dropped a further several degrees, because Princess Adela in a temper was a still, cold, terribly precise thing, and she was now unmistakably in a temper. "Let me be certain I have this right," she said. "Rowan, who is 19 when his mother dies and 22 now, and by every account I have of him a serious and self-possessed young man, whatever grief has done to him. Rowan gives a standing order that his mother's dressing room is not to be opened. He enters it in the book. He posts it in the guardroom. He tells no one his reasons, which is his entire right, because it is his mother's room and his father has plainly agreed the room is his to keep. And you, Morwenna, have decided, on your own authority, wearing a crown at 9:30, with a footman and a bag and Pell, that this order is a boy's morbid whim and yours to overrule. And when the guard whose duty it is to hold that order held it correctly and courteously and without laying a finger on you, you have decided that the thing to do is to call him aggressive and threaten to have him removed." She let that sit. "Have I missed anything? The satchel, perhaps. What is the satchel for, Pell? One tends a dead woman's memory with one's hands and one's heart. What does one carry away in a bag?" Pell had no answer. He was a clever man, but he had prepared his cleverness for a doorkeeper, not for the king's sister. And there is a great deal a smooth gray man can manage until a princess who has known him 30 years asks him plainly what the bag is for, in a corridor, with everyone listening. He opened his mouth and shut it and became, for the first time, merely a middle-aged man holding an empty satchel he could not explain. "It's for," he began. "It's for nothing," Adela said, "because you are not going into that room, and neither are you, Morwenna, and neither is your footman, and neither, I think, is your unfortunate daughter, who has been trying to sink into that linen closet for the last 2 minutes, and whom you should not have dragged into this at all." Verena flinched at being seen. Adela's voice, without rising, had acquired an edge like a winter morning. "You will all 4 turn around and go back down the stair the way you came up. And the crown, Morwenna, take it off. It's embarrassing. Whatever you thought it would buy you up here, it has bought you the opposite. It has told everyone in this passage exactly what kind of mourning you meant to have. For a long moment I thought that would be the end of it, that Morwenna would fold, as most people folded before Adela, and gather her party and retreat and try some other day by some other means. And if she had, this would be a smaller story, a story about a princess's sharp tongue and a guard's steady feet, and it would end here. But it did not end here, because I had underestimated exactly how much Morwenna needed to get into that room, and how frightened she was of what would happen if she did not. And a frightened person who has already gambled everything does not fold when the cards turn. They double. "No," said Morwenna. She said it to Adela, to the king's sister, to the one authority in the passage she could neither charm nor threaten nor outrank, and the single flat syllable dropped into the corridor like a stone into a still pond, and I saw Verena's hand fly to her mouth, and I saw Pell go a shade grayer, and I understood in that instant that I had been wrong about the shape of the morning after all. I had thought the danger was that Morwenna would search the room. The danger, I now saw, was far larger than a search, because a woman does not defy the king's sister to her face over a dressing room, unless there is something in that dressing room that will destroy her if it is not got out and got out today. "No," she said again, and now she was looking not at Adela but past her, at the door, at me, at the whole immovable fact of the thing standing between her and whatever it was she had come for. "You don't understand what's in there. None of you understand. Rowan doesn't understand. He thinks he's keeping his mother's memory, the sentimental fool. He doesn't even know what he's guarding. There is a thing in that room, and it is mine by every right, and Isolde hid it out of pure spite because she hated me, and I will not stand in a corridor and be lectured by a woman in dog-walking tweed while it sits there in the dark being used against me." Her voice had climbed, at last, out of the cold control she had held it in all morning, up into something raw and near to breaking, and it was, God help me, the most honest thing she had said since she came up the stair. "Open the door," she said to me, to Adela, to the house, to the air. "Open the door and I'll show you. I'll show you it's mine. And then we'll see who owes whom an apology." And here at last the whole matter turned, not because of anything I did, but because of what she had just, in her fury, let slip. Because a woman who says the guarded room is a shrine to a dead queen's dresses is one thing. A woman who says there is a specific thing in it, hers by right, hidden out of spite, that could be used against her. That woman has just told the entire passage that the Crown Prince's strange order was not the whim of a grieving boy at all. It was exactly what the prince had told me in the dark 3 winters gone. There was something in that room certain people would give a great deal to reach, and Morwenna, in trying to force it open, had just proven the reason it had to stay closed. Princess Adela heard it too. Of course she did, she heard everything. "Used against you," Adela said slowly, and the temper in her had banked down into something colder and more dangerous, the stillness of a person who has just realized the argument they were having was the small version of a much larger one. "Used against you how, Morwenna? What is in that room?" Morwenna did not answer because she had heard herself, too late, and she was a clever enough woman to know that she had just walked past the edge of a cliff in front of the worst possible witness. The raw thing in her face folded back down under the composed thing, but too slowly, and the folding was itself a confession. She had said too much. She knew it. And a person who has said too much has 2 roads: to retreat and pray it is forgotten, or to press on and win outright so fast that the slip is buried under the victory. Morwenna, being Morwenna, chose to press. "It doesn't concern you," she said to Adela, gathering the shreds of her authority back around her. "It is a private family matter between myself and the estate of the late queen. It has nothing to do with Rowan's grief and nothing to do with you, and I will thank you not to make it a scandal in a servant's corridor. Now, I am going into that room. Guardsman," she rounded on me, and there was something almost pleading under the command now, which is the most dangerous form a command can take, because a person commanding out of desperation will go further than a person commanding out of mere pride for the last time. "Step aside. I am the Queen Consort of this realm, and I am giving you a lawful order in the presence of the king's own sister, who may correct me if I exceed my authority, and she has not because I have not. Step aside." And it was, I must admit, a cleverer move than it looked, because it tried to turn Adela's presence into cover, to make the princess's silence into consent, to dress the forcing of the door as a lawful command witnessed and unopposed. If Adela said nothing, Morwenna could claim afterward that the king's sister had stood by and let it happen. It put the weight back on me, and worse, it put a share of it on Adela, and I saw the princess understand the trap of it and pause half a second to choose her ground. I did not wait for her to choose. It was my door and my order and my duty, and I would not shelter behind a princess any more than I would step aside for a queen. "Ma'am," I said, and I said it to Morwenna, but I pitched it for the whole passage. "You've said the order is a private matter between yourself and the late queen's estate. If that's so, then it is exactly the kind of matter that must not be settled by forcing a guarded door on a servant's stair. It's the kind of matter that goes before the king, or before those who administer the estate in the open with both sides heard. You've told us there's a thing in this room you claim by right and the prince is keeping without knowing what it is. Good. Then say so to the king. Bring your claim into the light. If it's yours, the light will give it to you, and no guard will stand in your way. But if it's yours, ma'am, why in the name of anything would you need to take it out of a dead woman's room in secret, in a bag, before anyone can look at it? A thing that is yours by right does not have to be stolen back." I should not have said the word steal. A guardsman speaks less, not more, and I had let the morning draw more out of me than was wise. But it was the true word, and the true word, once it is in the air of a room, cannot be taken back, and it did its work. Morwenna went white, not the pale of anger, the white of a person who has been named, and in the silence that followed from the far end of the passage at the top of the east stair for the second time that morning, there came another tread, faster than Adela's had been, younger. 2 steps at a time near the top, the tread of a person who has been sent for and has come at a run. It was Crown Prince Rowan. Someone had gone for him, a maid, as it turned out, who had heard the shouting and had the sense to run not to the captain, but to the one person whose order was being broken. He came up out of the stairwell fast, in shirt sleeves, no coat, his hair disordered, a young man of 22 with his mother's gray eyes and his father's long jaw, and he stopped dead at the top of the passage and took in the same scene Adela had taken in, and I watched his face go through a great deal in a very short time. He saw the coronet. He saw the bag. He saw his aunt planted like a rock and the Queen Consort's party bunched and pale, and he saw me standing across his mother's door with my rifle at my shoulder, holding it, 3 years and 1 promise in the dark since he'd asked me if I could carry it. And I saw him understand all at once that the day he had warned me of had come, and that the door was still shut, and that his man had held. "What is happening here?" he said. His voice was quiet, but it was not a boy's voice, whatever the court believed of him. It was very level and very cold, and there was iron all the way through it. "Aunt Adela, why is the Queen Consort standing at my mother's door in a crown?" "Because she came to open it, Rowan," said Adela, "and your guardsman would not let her, and thank God for your guardsman, because I have been standing here 5 minutes and I have learned more about what your stepmother wants out of that room than I think she ever meant anyone to know. Ask her what's in it. Ask her what the bag is for. And then, my dear, I think you had better decide whether this is a matter for a quiet corridor or for your father." Rowan came down the passage. He came slowly, and the slowness was worse than speed would have been, and Morwenna, for all her nerve, took an involuntary half-step back as he approached, because there is nothing so unsettling as a young person you have spent years dismissing as weak revealing, in the space of 10 seconds, that you were entirely wrong about them. He stopped in front of her. He did not look at the door or at me or at the bag. He looked at her. "You came to search my mother's room," he said. It was not a question. "Rowan," she began, "you don't understand." "No," he said. "You've said that twice now. I'm told that I don't understand what I'm keeping." "But you're wrong, Morwenna. I'm the one person in this house who does understand what I'm keeping. My mother told me. She told me the night before she died. She knew she was dying. She'd known for weeks, and she told me what she'd put in that room and who would come for it and what to do when they did." His voice did not rise, but something behind it did, some long-banked heat. "She told me you would come. Not maybe. Would. She said, Morwenna will try to get into that room and she'll have a reason, and the reason will sound kind, and you must not believe it and you must not let her, no matter what she says or who she brings or what it costs. And I've kept that door shut for 3 years wondering if she was right about you, half hoping she was wrong, half ashamed of myself for guarding a room against a grief that might have been real." He drew a breath. "And here you are, in a crown, with a bag, on the back stair." "Exactly as she said. You've spared me the last of my doubt at least. I should almost thank you." Morwenna's control broke then, the way a dam breaks, not all at once but in a single fast crack that runs the whole height of it, and then lets everything through. "She hated me," she said, and her voice was shaking now, all the warm and cold masks gone, only the raw grievance left. "Your sainted mother. You worship a woman who spent the last year of her life gathering things to ruin me, letters, papers, and accounting she had no right to keep. All of it locked in that room where I couldn't reach it. A knife she left in the dark for you to find and use whenever it suited you. Do you know what it is to live in a house with a dead woman's trap laid under your feet? To wake every day knowing there's a sealed room and you don't know what's in it, only that it was gathered to destroy you. I am not a monster, Rowan. I came to take back what was being held over my head. Anyone would. Anyone." And there it was, the whole of it, spilled at last on the stones of the passage. Not a shrine, not a grief. A dead queen's evidence, gathered against the woman who had come after her, sealed by a dying mother into a room she trusted her son to keep, so that the truth could not be quietly disposed of by the person it condemned. Isolde had not built a memorial. She had built a strongbox, and disguised it as a memorial precisely so that no one would think to force it, and she had made her son the key and the lock both. The order that everyone took for the soft whim of a grieving boy was in fact the hardest and most far-sighted thing in the house. A dead woman reaching 3 years past her own death to keep a wrong from being buried, and a young man keeping faith with her though he did not know, until this morning, whether the faith was even warranted. Prince Rowan looked at his stepmother for a long moment. When he spoke, the iron had gone out of his voice and something quieter and sadder had come into it, which was somehow more final than the iron. "You've just told me, in front of my aunt and 4 witnesses and the guard on the door, that there is material in that room concerning you, that you knew was there, and that you came this morning to remove in secret before anyone could examine it." "Whatever's in there, Morwenna, I didn't know its particulars until this moment. I only knew my mother wanted it kept, but you've just made certain it will be examined. Not by me in a corridor, by the king, and by those who administer my mother's estate in the open with you present and heard, exactly as it should be." He turned at last to me, and for the first time that morning our eyes met and he gave me the smallest nod, the same real nod he had given me 3 winters ago in the dark. "The room stays closed, Hale, until my father and the estate say otherwise in the proper way. You've held it. Hold it a little longer." "Yes, Your Highness," I said, 2 words. They were the easiest 2 words I ever spoke. It was Princess Adela who ended the scene, because it was the kind of scene that only a person of her exact seniority could end cleanly. She turned to the Queen Consort's party, to Pell, to the empty-handed footman, to poor white Verena by the linen closet, and she said, in the dry, flat voice that expected and received instant obedience, "You 3, down the stair, now. Pell, you'll wait in the steward's hall until the master of the household sends for you, and you'll bring that bag with you and open it in front of him, empty as it is, so there's no question later of what did or didn't leave this floor. Verena, go and find your brother Cassius and stay with him and out of this. You've done nothing this morning but be dragged where you didn't want to go, and no one will hold it against you if you take no further part. Go." They went. Pell first, gray and folded, the footman after, Verena last, with one backward look at her mother that had more in it than I could read. And then it was only the 4 of us in the passage, the prince, the princess, the Queen Consort, and the guard on the door. "Morwenna," said Adela, and now, strangely, there was no triumph in her voice, only a kind of weary steadiness. "You'll come with me to Alaric, not because I'm dragging you to your ruin, I've no appetite for that, whatever you may think, but because the thing you've feared for 3 years is going to happen now no matter what either of us wants, and the only choice left to you is whether you meet it standing on your own feet or hiding behind a story that's already collapsed. Come and see the king. Say what you've said here, or say better if you can, but the sneaking is over. The back stairs are over. Whatever's in that room, it comes into the light now and you along with it. That's the whole of it." She held out no hand, offered no comfort, but she waited, and there was in the waiting a strange, hard dignity, an old woman giving a younger one the chance to walk to her fate upright. And Morwenna, after a moment that stretched very long, took the coronet from her head. She did it slowly, with both hands, and she looked at the thin band of white gold in her fingers as if she had only just remembered she was wearing it, as if it had become, in the last quarter of an hour, an embarrassing and childish thing. She did not put it back on. She held it at her side, and she straightened, and some remnant of the woman who had come up the stair an hour before reassembled itself into a person who could, at least, walk down again without being carried. "Very well," she said, to Adela, not to the prince, never to me. "Take me to Alaric, but I'll say this once and you'll remember I said it. Isolde was not the saint you all make her. That room will condemn me for things half of which I never did, and it will say nothing of what was done to me. Remember that when you're all so pleased with yourselves." It was, in its way, the truest and the saddest thing she said all morning, and I have never been sure in all the years since how much of it to believe, which is, I have come to think, exactly the reason a matter like that must go before a fair hearing and not be settled by a guard, or a prince, or an angry aunt in a corridor. That was the whole point of the door, not to condemn her, to keep the question open until it could be answered rightly. They went down the stair together, the king's sister and the queen consort, and the passage was quiet again, and it was only the prince and me and the door. He stood a while looking at it, the way he had that night 3 winters gone. Then he said without turning, "You could have opened it, you know, this morning. She'd have made it easy. She gave you every excuse a man could want, the kind story, the crown, the threat to your post. Half the guard in this house would have found a reason to step aside and no one would have blamed them, and I'd never have known the difference until it was too late." He turned then and looked at me. "Why didn't you?" I thought about how to answer that. A guardsman is not asked such things often, and I wanted to answer it true and not grand. "You told me it might come, your highness," I said. "That night. You said if anyone ever came with a good reason and a soft voice and a bag, I was to hold the door if they took the coat off my back. You said the order didn't need a reason, that was the point of an order. I only did what you told me, and I found I could when it came to it because you told me plain 3 years ago exactly what I was holding and why. A man can hold most anything if he knows what it is. It's the not knowing that lets a soft voice in." I paused. "You armed me, your highness, that morning in the dark. I only stood where you set me." The prince was quiet a moment. Then he did a thing I did not expect. He put out his hand and I looked at it, and I understood he meant to shake mine, a prince to a doorkeeper, and I shifted my rifle and took it, and his grip was hard and brief and meant it. "My mother chose the right man to guard her door," he said. "I only wish I could tell her so." And then, because he was still under the iron, a young man who had lost his mother and had just had the whole grief of it dragged out into a corridor in front of witnesses, his composure wavered, only for a second, only at the edges, and I did the one kindness a guardsman can do for a great person in such a moment, which is to look away, to become furniture again, to give him the privacy of my not seeing. When I looked back, he had gathered himself, and he nodded once more, and he went down the stair after the others to his father, to the long fair reckoning that would take the rest of that year, and would be, in the end, exactly as public and exactly as just as his mother had meant it to be. And I stayed. I took up my place again at the end of the passage, in the gray light, my back to the shelves and my face to the corridor down which no one now came, and I stood the rest of my watch on a door that was still, and would stay, closed. I will tell you how it ended, because a story of a held door owes you the accounting of what the door held, and because so much of what was whispered through the house in the weeks that followed was, again, wrong. The room was opened. That surprised some people, who had imagined that the whole point of my morning's work was to keep it shut forever, but it was never that. A door is not kept closed to make a thing vanish. It is kept closed until the right hands can open it in the right light with the right people watching. 3 days after the morning in the passage, the king himself came up the east stair, the first and only time I ever saw King Alaric on the east wing detail, with the master of the household on one side and Princess Adela on the other, and walking a pace behind, a woman I did not know, who turned out to be the independent administrator of the late queen's estate, brought in from outside the household precisely so that no one could ever say the family had marked its own examination. The king stopped in front of me. He was an old man by then and tired, and he looked at me a long moment the way his son had, reading me, and then he said, "You're the guardsman. Hail." I said I was, your majesty. He nodded slowly. "My son tells me you held this door against my wife and against the threat of your own post, and would not be moved. I've come to lift the order, so you understand. But I want it lifted properly, with you standing here to see it lifted, because you're the man who kept it, and a man who keeps a thing has the right to see it into honest hands." And he said to the master of the household, in a clear voice with witnesses all around, I lift the crown prince's standing order on this room, as of now, for the purpose of a lawful and recorded examination of its contents by the estate's administrator. Note the hour. The master noted the hour. And then and only then did the crown prince step forward with his key, his own key, the one I had seen him hold and not use in the dark, and open, for the first time in 3 years, the door I had guarded. I did not go in. It was not my place, and I did not wish to. A man can keep a door for years and feel no curiosity at all about what lies past it, because the keeping was never about the contents, only about the keeping. But I heard later, in the way a guardsman always hears things, what the room had held. Not dresses, or not only dresses. In a locked writing case at the back of a wardrobe, wrapped in tissue as though it were a garment, the late Queen Isolde had left an ordered account, letters, copies of household ledgers, a record kept in her own careful hand over the last year of her life, of a long and quiet diversion of moneys and heirlooms out of the estate that was meant, by the old settlements, to pass to her children. It was not a lurid thing. There was no crime of blood in it, nothing that touched a child's safety, nothing dark in that way. It was the slow, patient, paper kind of wrong, the kind that dresses itself as administration and hopes no one will ever add up the columns. Isolde dying had added up the columns. And knowing she would not live to be believed, and knowing exactly who would move to make the record disappear the moment she was gone, she had done the only far-sighted thing left to a dying woman. She had sealed the account behind a door that grief would make sacred and no decent person would think to force, and she had given the key to the one person in the world she was certain would keep faith, her son, and told him to hold it, whatever kind story came, until the truth could stand on its own in the light. The reckoning took the better part of that year, as I said, and it was conducted exactly as it should have been, slowly, fairly, with the Queen Consort present and represented and heard. Her own claims and grievances entered into the record alongside the late Queen's account, nothing settled by anger and nothing settled by a guard. I will not pretend to know the whole of what was found. Those columns were added up by people far above my station and are not mine to publish. But I know the estate that was meant for Isolde's children was restored to Isolde's children, and I know that certain arrangements which had grown up quietly over the years were undone. And I know that the Queen Consort standing in the house, though she kept her title and her rooms, was never after that morning what it had been before, because the house had seen the coronet come off her head in a corridor, and a thing like that is not unseen. Whether the whole of her grievance was true, whether Isolde had also wronged her, in the private ways the two of them alone had known, I never learned, and I have made my peace with not learning it. That is the price and the point of a fair hearing. It settles what can be settled and leaves the rest to the two women who knew, one of them dead, one of them silent, and to a judgment higher than any court in Eldermore. As for me, there was, I am glad to say, no reckoning at all of the kind Morwenna had promised me. My name was not struck off the roll. My record was not marked. When the story of the morning went round the house, and it went round, the way all stories go round, though I never told it and Adela told it only once and plainly. The version that stuck was not the Queen Consort's version of a violent, unstable man, because there were too many honest witnesses to the truth. A princess who had watched me stand still and courteous under threat, a prince who owed his mother's last wish to my 2 feet, a maid who had run for the right person, even a white and unhappy Verena who, asked later, would not lie for her mother, and said only that the guardsman had never touched anyone, and had spoken to the Queen with more patience than the Queen had spoken to him. 4 voices against one, Morwenna had said, and she had been right about the arithmetic and wrong about which way it would run, because it turned out that when the light came on, 3 of her own 4 would not stand behind the lie, and the truth needs only one honest mouth to undo a lie that needs 4. The Crown Prince did not forget it. He was not a demonstrative man. His mother's death had pressed the demonstrativeness out of him young, but in the years I served after that morning, I was aware, in 100 small, unspoken ways, that the man on the throne-to-be knew my name and knew what I had done with it. And that is a kind of reward a guardsman values more than medals, because it is the reward of being trusted, which is the only thing our whole trade is finally for. Some years on, when the East Wing was reorganized and the old dead-end passage given over at last to other uses, the prince, a man grown fully into himself by then, had me told privately through the captain that the post I had held was being retired, and that he wished me to know he considered it the best-kept post in the house's history, and that if I wished a different detail I had only to name it. I named the gate. I have always liked the gate. A man sees more of the world from a gate than from a dead-end passage, and I had spent enough of my life keeping a door that opened onto nothing. But I think of that door still. I think of it more than a man might expect, given that all it ever did was stay shut. I think of the gray morning and the coronet and the empty bag, and the 6 words I said, and the reach I did not let past me, and the prince's hard, brief handshake in an empty corridor. And when younger men on the detail ask me, as they sometimes do, having heard some garbled half of the story, what the trick of it was, how a doorkeeper holds firm against a queen with a crown on her head and a threat in her mouth and 4 witnesses at her back, I tell them the only true thing I know about it, which is the thing the prince taught me in the dark, and the thing I have never once found to be false in all my years of standing still. An order does not need a reason, I tell them. That is the whole of its strength. A reason can be argued with. A reason can be out-talked by a clever tongue. A reason can be made to seem cruel by a warm enough voice on a gray enough morning. But an order that is lawfully given and honestly held needs no reason and answers to no argument, because it is not a thing you reason your way to, it is a thing you keep. The kind story is the crowbar. The crown is the crowbar. The threat to your livelihood is the crowbar. And a man who understands that all of them are crowbars, and that a crowbar is only ever brought to a door someone has no honest way to open, can stand at that door with his rifle at his shoulder and his eyes on the middle distance and be, for as long as it takes, entirely unmovable, not because he is strong, but because he is standing exactly where a better and braver person than himself set him, and has decided, quietly, that he will still be standing there when they come to see whether he moved. I did not move. That is the whole of my part in it. A dying queen was far-sighted, and a grieving prince was faithful, and a sharp old princess came up a stair at the right moment, and the truth, in the end, came into the light and was fairly weighed. And none of that would have had the chance to happen if a doorkeeper in the East Wing had traded a rule he understood for the approval of a queen who was smiling at him from a pace away. So I did not trade it. I stood the door. And when I am gone, and the passage is forgotten, and no one living remembers that there was ever a room there worth the keeping, I would be content to have it said of me only this: that on the one morning it mattered when a soft voice and a crown and a threat all came at once to a door he was sworn to hold, the guardsman held it. That is enough. For a man of my trade, that is everything.